A bump in the night, a creaking floor, a shadowy figure near your door, a haunting tune evoking fear and sadness. You are now tuned in to Mysteries and Madness.
This next case took place in the Audubon Park neighborhood of Louisville, Kentucky. Not far from Camp Taylor, the neighborhood is described as being a quiet place with strict law enforcement. A place where few things go unseen, or unreported, basically. Andrea Knabel was last seen while heading in the direction of her mother's house. She was 37 years old in August of 2019 when she went missing. Those who knew her and loved her, they describe her as a very caring person who would put the needs of others ahead of herself, and ahead of her own needs. She was a quick learner who could relate very well with others, regardless to their background. She was the mother of two, and a graduate of the University of Louisville, wherein she received her bachelor's degree in marketing. Life seemed to be going very well for Andrea, until things took a turn for the worst. It seemed as though all at once, her life began to fall apart before her very eyes. First, her fiancé was arrested for selling meth. Around that same time, she was laid off from Humana, where she was employed. Consequently, Andrea was forced to take a job that paid far less, working as a delivery driver. Until misfortune struck again and her car was totaled after it broke down on the expressway during the time of a snowstorm. Andrea had lost her job, her car, her house, and her fiancé, all in a short span of time. She was forced to move back home, into the house that her mother owned, located in Audubon Park. There on Chickadee Road, in the childhood house that she had been raised in. This is where her sister Sarah and her fiancé Ethan were staying at the time when she moved back home. While the house was under renovation, Ethan owned a renovation company and he and Sarah were living there, while making the necessary repairs. During Andrea's time here, once again, things took a turn for the worse. Andrea's mother and both of her younger sisters, Erin and Sarah, were very concerned about the people who Andrea was bringing around the house. They were deeply concerned about some of the characters that Andrea was associating with. Many of them were clearly taking advantage of her, and one of them had even stolen all of the televisions from Andrea's house. Furthermore, her family believed that she was going through a mental health crisis of some sort, and they were concerned that she may have been using drugs, such as meth. She would borrow her sister's car, only to return it many hours after the established return time. She would return the vehicle extremely late, without providing an explanation as to why. Andrea no longer appeared to be trustworthy from her family's perspective, because of her poor decisions. These issues were causing conflict at her mother's house, where she was living at the time that she went missing. And on August the 12th of 2019, all hell broke loose. As the family gathered together to prepare to have dinner. This is when Andrea's mother, her youngest sister Sarah and Sarah's fiancé, Ethan, began to lecture Andrea, and a heated argument ensued. Harsh words were spoken to Andrea and Andrea responded likewise, with harsh words. What probably made Andrea the most upset that evening, was that all three of them appeared to take sides against her. Whatever the case, after the conclusion of the argument, Andrea went upstairs to get away, to cool off basically. Around 9 p.m., when all was calm again, Andrea's sister's boyfriend, Ethan, gave her a ride to McDonald's to pick up something to eat. This was to compensate for missing dinner earlier, due to the argument. After picking up dinner at McDonald's, around 9:50 p.m., Ethan dropped her off at Kentucky One Hospital where she would remain until 11:22 p.m. She was taken to the hospital, so she could be seen regarding a serious rash that she had developed on her face. After dropping Andrea off at the Kentucky One Hospital, Ethan left. The plan was for her to get back home by using a Lyft gift card that her mother had given her. But apparently something went wrong and the gift card failed to work for some reason. Consequently, Andrea had to pay for her ride back to her mother's house, out of pocket. If her evening wasn't already going terrible enough as it was, things were about to get even worse for Andrea. After being dropped off back at her mother's house at around 11:34 p.m., she would spend the next 30 minutes knocking on the door, to no avail, unable to get inside. She was forced to seek refuge at her sister Erin's house, which was located in the 400 block of Fincastle Road, about 1 mile away. Andrea arrived there on foot around 12:15 a.m. Her sister Erin and a friend of hers were sitting on the porch, having a glass of wine at the time. Upon seeing her sister, Andrea immediately began to open up and express her discontent to Erin regarding how she had been treated earlier by their mother, their sister Sarah, and her fiancé Ethan. She informed Erin that no one was opening up the door at the house, and she had no key to get inside. After hearing her out and attempted to comfort her, Erin gave Andrea a ride back to their mother's house to drop her off, before driving back home to her friend and her children. But later, around 12:15 a.m., Erin heard a knock on the back door. It was Andrea again, just as before. This time she was even more upset than she had been earlier, so upset that she was crying. For the second time, no one at their mother's home where she was staying would open up the door to let her inside. She had made her way back to her sister's house once more. This time she asked Erin if she could just crash there at her house overnight. But Erin had to be at work early the next morning. and she didn't feel comfortable leaving Andrea there at her house while she was away at work. Erin had 2 children of her own living there with her, and the last thing that she wanted was to put them in a situation where they could potentially be exposed to dangerous people. For these reasons, she told Andrea that she could not allow her to stay the night at her place. This was the last time that Erin would ever see her sister again. The time was 1:38 a.m. of August the 13th, 2019. Andrea was last seen walking in the direction of her mother's house. The house where she was staying. The same house that she had failed to get inside twice already within a matter of hours. As she was walking in that direction, Erin said that Andrea appeared to be scrolling through her phone. Phone records would later show that she did place multiple phone calls to friends along her walk back to her mother's house between 1:30 a.m. and 1:54 a.m. So she was probably searching through her contacts list at the time, in hopes of finding someone who was willing to help her in her time of distress. While GPS tracking showed Andrea as arriving back at her mother's house at 1:54 a.m. Just as earlier, once again, she was unable to get inside. Using combined tracking records from Andrea's laptop and her phone, investigators were able to come up with a precise timeline of Andrea's movements. According to phone records, Andrea would remain here in the vicinity of her mother's house for the next 2 hours. What she was doing here for the majority of this time is unknown. But she was still unable to get inside despite her sister Erin's pleas for their parents to make sure that she was granted entry this time. Though her mother did not live there on Chickadee Road at the house with Sarah, Ethan, and Andrea, due to the house being under renovation at the time. Their sister Sarah and her fiancé Ethan were certainly inside and present on both occasions when Andrea knocked, attempting to get in. When first interviewed by detectives, Sarah and Ethan claimed that they hadn't heard Andrea knocking on the door. But during a later interview with the police, both Sarah and Ethan admitted that they had indeed heard Andrea knocking on both occasions. They just hadn't let her in, despite hearing her. It's clear that the two of them did not want her there inside of the house with them, and later, there were rumors that their mother had asked Sarah and Ethan to change the locks on the doors. If true, this would suggest that Andrea's mother did not want her inside of the house either. It's possible that they may have figured Andrea would just sleep inside of her vehicle that night, as she had managed to purchase a second vehicle using crowdfunding, but unfortunately this vehicle was not operable. However, regardless, she was known to sleep there inside of the car sometimes when she wanted to get away from the hostility there inside of her mother's house. On August the 13th at 6:31 a.m. Andrea's phone sent out one last signal, registering as active. But unfortunately the phone was not turned on long enough to register a location, and the phone itself was never found. The short signal time may have been due to a dying battery. So what happened to Andrea Knabel? Initially, up until the 7th of August, Andrea's sister Erin believed that she had possibly made contact with one of her friends. Erin believed that Andrea was staying with her best friend, Amber. She believed that Andrea had requested, and she had been granted, refuge there with Amber. But after the passage of time, Erin knew that something wasn't right, and after Amber was contacted, she confirmed that Andrea had not been staying with her. In fact, Amber informed Erin that she hadn't spoken with her in over a week. So on August the 17th, Erin contacted the police, and she also requested help from the public.
It's been 4 years since a Louisville mother disappeared, and her family is not giving up hope. Today, family and friends of Andrea Knabel gathered at Hess Lane and Pindle Avenue and handed out updated flyers regarding her disappearance. She was last seen walking in Audubon Park in the Camp Taylor neighborhoods around 1 a.m. August 13th of 2019. Through the years, many people have called in thinking they saw Knabel, but none have revealed her whereabouts.
When somebody says they have her, that's different than we may have seen her. They had her there presently, and there's been several of those, but they simply disappear into thin air, as many others have.
If you know anything, call the Knabel tip line at the number on your screen. That is 502-806-4840. You can also call LMPD.
Later, a body that matched Andrea's description was found in the Philadelphia River. The deceased woman had been beaten very badly. Dental records were inconclusive, and therefore dental records could not be used to rule Andrea out. A detective Lauder was sent out to Erin's house to acquire DNA from both Erin and her father. The DNA would be used to discern as to whether or not the body found in the Philadelphia River was that of Andrea's, or not. The results would come back as a negative match. The body found in the Philadelphia River was not Andrea's. However, as Detective Lauder, Erin, and her father were on the porch, discussing the possible grim explanations behind her sister Andrea's disappearance, with the detective, they took notice that someone who was driving a gold Chevy Impala drove past the house. He drove by 3 or 4 times, before stopping in front of Erin's house, where he parked, and he began to watch them, while eating a sucker. When the lazy detective who was present there on the porch refused to investigate the suspicious vehicle, Erin's father approached the Impala himself, and this is when the unknown driver immediately sped off. However, he then drove up the street 2 more times, and this time he even waved at them while driving past. This is when Aaron's father began to pursue the Impala. He was able to get the license plate number from the vehicle, which came back as stolen. The license plate number was 637ZLA. Aaron described the driver as a thin white male, who was eating a sucker. There, also seated in the vehicle, was a thin white female who had long hair. Long hair that may have been styled in a ponytail. The Impala had darkly tinted windows, but despite the dark tint, Aaron was able to see the silhouettes of both occupants through the front window. The illegal tint alone would have given the lazy detective more than enough justification to investigate the vehicle. However, he refused to do so. None of Aaron's neighbors were familiar with the vehicle. The unknown person behind the wheel seemed to be very interested in what was going on. While this individual may have been nothing more than a weirdo who was simply attempting to taunt them, or to get their attention, he could also have been a person relevant to the case, or possibly one of the many shady individuals that Andrea was known to have associated with. Later, there were rumors that Andrea's drug dealer drove a car matching this same description. There were also rumors that Andrea had been using counterfeit money to buy drugs. These were only rumors, of course, and it is not known for certain that Andrea was on drugs. Aaron, her dad, and investigators retraced the route that Andrea took on her way back to their mother's house that morning. They attempted to obtain any security camera footage and door camera footage from homes along the route that she walked. But this was unsuccessful, unfortunately. Andrea was what I call a fixer. She seems to have been an individual who found gratitude in repairing people who were broken. Some of those persons were drug addicts, such as her ex-boyfriend. Others who she associated with were simply bad people. And most likely this was the cause of her demise. She was in a very vulnerable position at the time that she went missing. Andrea was someone who knew a lot of people, and she interacted with a lot of people as a consequence. People who she barely knew, and sometimes people who she probably should not have known at all. Yet she is said to have trusted them and interacted with them. These types of cases are very difficult to solve, because the list of potential suspects are more extensive than the average missing case. I believe that Andrea most likely went off with someone that she trusted. Maybe the culprit responsible for her disappearance assumed that Andrea had no family who would be concerned if she was to go missing, based on how her family had treated her earlier. Maybe she had confided in this person, after requesting their help on that fateful morning. I can imagine a scenario where Andrea enters her killer's vehicle. Then she immediately begins pouring her heart out to them, thanking them, and informing them about how she had been treated by her family earlier, while completely unaware of the fact that the person seeming to rescue her would soon be the one who would take her away from her family, and away from this world. Then just maybe, could it be that Andrea met her end right there within the vicinity of their mother's house, or inside their mother's house? It was no secret that Andrea and her sister did not get along together. The neighbors mentioned that quite frequently. They could hear arguing coming from the house. Could it be that her own sister Sarah, and her fiancé Ethan, did the unspeakable? A search warrant for the house was granted, and a search was conducted. But detectives found no evidence that a crime had been committed there on the property. I believe that part of the reason why Andrea's family turned her away that night was also due to the rash on her face. Her family may have believed that the rash was something contagious, and they didn't want to be anywhere near her. What's ironic is that Andrea herself was known to volunteer her time to an organization called Missing in America. This is an organization whose mission was to locate the missing and bring them home. She is said to have been very effective during her time as an investigator with the group. As a result of her volunteer work with Missing in America, Andrea would have been well aware of the grief and the suffering endured by families of the missing when they mysteriously vanish. Some have even speculated that maybe Andrea disappeared on her own accord, with the intention of inflicting grief upon her family as a form of revenge for how she felt they had treated her. The family that she probably felt did not appreciate her or care about her at the time. Some would say that this was only tough love and self-preservation. The instinct to steer clear from dangerous people, and even those who may harbor them. Even if those individuals are family members that we know and love. Whatever the case, wherever you are, Andrea, just know that your family does love you, and now unlike before, all of them wish that you were at home. The very place that they at least seemed to have denied you. What they would do to hear the sound of you knocking on that door today. What they would do now to see you walking through that door at this very moment. Even if only for one last time before eternity. Just to let you know that